In the same way, the human body cannot properly recover when one severe wound is followed by another. The soul was never designed to absorb injury after injury without care. If a physical wound is left untreated and then compounded by another of equal severity, the prognosis worsens. Every physician understands this principle, yet we often ignore it when it comes to emotional and spiritual wounds. When emotional injuries go unrecognized or unresolved, they do not simply fade with time. They embed themselves into perception, memory, and behavior. What is ignored does not remain neutral. It becomes formative. Scripture speaks clearly to this reality. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for out of it flow the issues of life." The Hebrew word for heart is lev, which refers not only to emotions, but to the mind, will, intellect, and inner decision-making center. When the lev is wounded and left unguarded, everything flowing from it becomes distorted. The word issues in that verse comes from the Hebrew totsa'ah, meaning outgoings, borders, or boundaries. In other words, what exits your life is shaped by what is allowed to remain untreated within it. Unresolved emotional pain reshapes how a person sees the world, interprets relationships, and responds to pressure. Over time, untreated wounds can contribute to depression, chronic anger, emotional numbness, or distorted thinking patterns. This is not a lack of faith. This is what happens when pain is internalized rather than healed. Psalm 32, verse 3 says, "When I kept silence, my bones waxed old through my roaring all the day long." The Hebrew word for silence here implies suppression. David is teaching us that unspoken pain does not stay quiet. It finds another language, often through the body. Psalm 38, verse 3 adds, "There is no soundness in my flesh, neither is there any rest in my bones." The word soundness comes from the Hebrew shalom, meaning wholeness, peace, completeness. A lack of shalom in the soul eventually affects the body. Many irrational or destructive behaviors are not born from nowhere. They are often the outward expression of pain that was never named, never acknowledged, and never healed. Hebrews 12:15 warns us to look diligently lest a root of bitterness spring up and trouble many. The Greek concept aligns with the Hebrew idea of shoresh, meaning root system. Roots operate underground. They are unseen, but they determine the fruit. Bitterness does not start loud, it starts hidden. This is how unresolved emotions can surface as self-sabotage, substance abuse, isolation, criminal behavior, violence, or even suicidal ideation. Not because a person is evil or irredeemable, but because untreated pain will eventually seek expression. Proverbs 18:14 says, "The spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity, but a wounded spirit who can bear?" The Hebrew word for wounded is nakah, meaning struck, smitten, or beaten down. Scripture tells us that physical sickness can be endured, but an untreated inner wound weakens a person's entire structure. God never intended pain to remain hidden. Psalm 147, verse 3 says, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." The Hebrew word for heal is Rapha, meaning to restore, repair, and make whole. The word bind up is chabash, meaning to wrap firmly, as in a physician dressing a wound. God introduces himself as Jehovah Rapha, not in a moment of perfection, but after Israel encountered bitterness at Marah. Healing was God's response to their pain, not their performance. What is faced can be healed. What is brought into the light loses authority, but what is denied quietly gains influence. Wisdom says, tend to the wound before it multiplies. Grace says, healing is still possible. And truth says, ignoring pain never makes it powerless. This is not a call to relive trauma. It is a call to steward your soul. Because healing does not require forgetting the wound, it requires allowing God to touch it before it defines you.